The morning Naomi Parker's father told her she was no longer his daughter. The sun rose blood red over the Sierra Nevada foothills, painting Murphy's, California in shades of crimson and gold that seemed to prophesy heartbreak. It was May 1875, and the small mining town still buzzed with the fading dreams of the gold rush, though most of the easy riches had long since been claimed by men with harder hearts and faster hands than her scholarly father possessed. "You will not see that drifter again," Samuel Parker said, his voice cold as winter stone despite the warmth flooding through the windows of their modest home on Main Street. "I did not raise my daughter to throw herself away on a penniless gambler with nothing but a horse and a deck of cards to his name." Naomi stood in the parlor, her hands trembling at her sides, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun that suddenly felt too tight, too constraining. At 22 years old, she had never defied her father, never questioned his authority, never stepped outside the carefully drawn boundaries of respectability that defined the Parker family in this rough town. But something had changed 3 weeks ago when Marcus Hendricks rode into Murphy's with his easy smile and dark eyes that seemed to see straight through all her careful propriety to the wild, yearning heart beneath. "Papa, he is not what you think," she said, hating how her voice shook. "He only plays cards to earn enough to buy land. He wants to build something real, something lasting. He wants to build castles in the air and expects my daughter to live in them," her father snapped. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Samuel Parker had come to California as a teacher, bringing culture and learning to the rough mining camps, and he wore his respectability like armor against the crude reality of the West. The man is 30 years old with nothing to show for it but debts and empty promises. "I forbid you to see him again." Her mother, Constance, sat in the corner like a pale ghost, her embroidery forgotten in her lap. She had not spoken throughout the confrontation, and her silence felt like betrayal. "And if I refuse?" The words escaped before Naomi could stop them, small and defiant in the morning air. Her father's face went still, all the anger draining away to leave something harder and more frightening in its place. "Then you are no daughter of mine. You will leave this house, and we will speak your name no more. You will be as dead to us as if we had buried you in the cemetery on the hill." The world seemed to tilt and spin. Naomi grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "You cannot mean that." "I mean every word." Samuel Parker turned his back on her, a gesture so final it felt like a door slamming shut. "You have until noon to decide. Choose that wastrel, and you choose a life without family, without home, without the protection of the Parker name. See how far his pretty words carry you when you are hungry and homeless." Naomi looked to her mother, desperate for some sign of softening, some hint that this madness could be stopped. But Constance Parker simply shook her head, tears streaming silently down her face, and said nothing at all. The hours until noon crawled by like wounded things. Naomi sat in her small bedroom, looking at the familiar walls, the books on her shelf, the sampler she had stitched when she was 12 that read "Home is where the heart dwells." She thought about Marcus, about the way he had looked at her outside the general store 2 days ago, his hat in his hands, his voice rough with emotion as he spoke of the future he wanted to build with her. She thought about her parents, about duty and obedience and the terrible price of defiance. When the church bell struck 12, she was standing in the parlor with a small carpetbag holding everything she owned that mattered: 3 dresses, her mother's silver locket that she had taken from the bureau without asking, a book of poetry, and the last letter Marcus had written her, its words burned into her memory. "I am going," she said simply. Her father did not turn around. Her mother covered her face with her hands and wept. and Naomi Parker walked out of her childhood home into the bright California sunshine, knowing she could never return. She found Marcus in the saloon, though it shamed her to enter such a place in broad daylight. The few men inside stared at her with open curiosity as she stood in the doorway, blinking against the dimness after the brilliant light outside. Marcus was at a corner table, dealing cards to himself with the absent-minded grace of long practice. When he saw her standing there with her carpetbag, his whole body went still. "Naomi!" He was on his feet in an instant, crossing the distance between them in long strides. "What has happened? Why do you have your bag?" The words tumbled out in a rush, all the pain and fear and desperate hope spilling over. She told him about her father's ultimatum, about the choice she had made, about the door that had closed behind her forever. As she spoke, Marcus's face went through a dozen different expressions: shock, anger, guilt, and finally something fierce and protective that made her heart beat faster. "God above, what have I done?" he said roughly. "Naomi, I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to cost you your family." "You did not cost me anything," she said, finding strength in her voice she had not known she possessed. "They made their choice and I made mine. I chose you, Marcus, I chose us." He pulled her into his arms right there in the saloon, heedless of the watching eyes, and held her like she was something infinitely precious and breakable. "I swear to you," he whispered into her hair, "I swear on everything I have or ever will have, I will make this right. I will give you the life you deserve." But promises were easier spoken than kept, as they learned in the brutal days that followed. Marcus had been renting a room above the stable, a space barely large enough for one person and entirely unsuitable for a woman of any respectability. The hotel owner, Mrs. Chen, took one look at Naomi's situation and refused to rent her a room without a wedding ring and a husband in residence. The scandal of Samuel Parker's daughter running off with a gambler spread through Murphy's like wildfire, and everywhere Naomi went, she felt the weight of judging eyes and whispered conversations. Marcus tried. He played cards every night, winning more often than he lost, but the earnings were meager and unpredictable. He spoke with the land office about parcels for sale, but the prices were far beyond his reach. He took odd jobs during the day, mucking stables, hauling freight, mending fences, coming back to their inadequate room each night exhausted and increasingly desperate. 2 weeks after Naomi left home, she saw her mother on the street. Constance Parker looked older, thinner, her face drawn with grief. For a moment their eyes met, and Naomi saw such longing there that her heart nearly broke. She stepped forward, mouth opening to speak, but her mother turned away sharply and crossed to the other side of the street, her skirts swishing with the finality of rejection. That night, Naomi cried in Marcus's arms until she had no tears left. He held her and stroked her hair and made promises he had no way to keep. And she loved him for trying, even as she wondered if her father had been right, if love was really enough to sustain them against the grinding reality of poverty and social exile. The answer came from an unexpected direction on a scorching afternoon in late June. Naomi was walking back from the creek where she had been washing their few clothes, her arms aching and her dress damp with sweat, when she heard the sound of a horse in distress. She followed the noise to find a beautiful sorrel mare tangled in a broken section of fence, her eyes rolling white with panic, a deep gash bleeding freely on her shoulder. Without thinking, Naomi set down her laundry basket and approached the horse slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones. The mare trembled but held still as Naomi worked carefully to free her legs from the wire. Once loose, the horse stumbled but did not run, and Naomi pressed her apron against the bleeding wound, maintaining steady pressure while continuing her soft stream of calming words. "Easy now, sweet girl. You are safe, I have got you. No one is going to hurt you. That is some fine handling." Naomi looked up sharply to find a man watching from horseback, silhouetted against the brilliant sky. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty work clothes and a battered hat that shadowed his face. As he dismounted and walked closer, she saw he was perhaps 25, with sun-browned skin, light brown hair, and eyes the color of aged whiskey that held both intelligence and kindness. "She is hurt badly," Naomi said, returning her attention to the mare. "The cut is deep. I can see that." The man crouched beside her, examining the wound with practiced efficiency. "You have a good hand with horses. Most folks would have spooked her worse trying to help. I am Kieran O'Sullivan. This is my fence she got tangled in and my mare who was fool enough to test whether the grass was greener on the other side." "Naomi Parker," she said automatically, then flinched. Was she still a Parker? Did she have any right to that name? If Kieran noticed her reaction, he did not comment. Instead, he pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and took over holding pressure on the wound. "I have a ranch about a mile north of town. If you help me walk her back, I would be grateful. She trusts you already, and I would rather not have her bolt and make the bleeding worse." It took nearly an hour to coax the limping mare back to Kieran's ranch, and with each step, Naomi felt the world expanding beyond the claustrophobic boundaries of Murphy's and scandal and failure. The ranch spread across a valley between the foothills, not vast but well maintained, with sturdy fences and a barn that looked recently painted. The house was simple but solid, built of good timber with a wide porch and windows that gleamed in the sunlight. "You have a beautiful place," Naomi said as they led the mare into the barn, which was blessedly cool after the heat outside. "Thank you. I have been working it for 5 years now, since I was 20. My parents died of fever back in Missouri, and I came west to start fresh." Kieran began gathering supplies to clean and stitch the wound. "Turns out I have a fair hand with cattle and horses, if nothing else." Naomi helped him work, following his quiet instructions, and found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something peaceful about the barn, about the simple task of caring for the injured animal, about Kieran's calm competence. He did not pry or ask questions, did not seem to know or care about her scandal, and treated her like a person rather than a cautionary tale. When the mare was finally settled with her wound cleaned and stitched, Kieran walked Naomi to the porch and brought her a dipper of cold water from the well. She drank gratefully, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was, how tired, how utterly exhausted from trying to stay strong. "I heard about what happened," Kieran said quietly. "Your father disowning you. The whole town has been talking about it." Naomi's hand tightened on the dipper. "Then you know I am ruined." "I know you made a choice that took courage," he corrected. "I know your father is a fool to throw away a daughter over pride. And I know you have been living in a room above a stable with a man who means well but cannot provide for you properly." Heat flooded her cheeks, shame and anger mixing together. "If you brought me here to lecture me, I brought you here because you saved my horse," Kieran interrupted gently. "But now that you are here, I have a proposition. My sister used to help me run this place, but she married last fall and moved to Sacramento. I need someone who can cook, keep house, help with the animals when needed. The job comes with a room in the house, meals and fair wages. Respectability too if you want it. I run a clean operation, Miss Parker, and anyone who works for me is under my protection." Naomi stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "Why would you do this? You do not know me." "I know you are kind to animals and brave enough to choose your own path," Kieran said. "That is enough for me, And before you worry, I am offering you honest employment, nothing more. You love Marcus Hendricks, and I respect that. But he cannot give you stability right now, and you need it. This way you would have a safe place to live, money of your own, and time for him to get his feet under him. What about Marcus? She asked. Would he be welcome here too? Kieran was quiet for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. I will not have gambling on my property, but if he wants honest work, I could use another ranch hand. The pay would not be much to start, but it would be steady. And if he proves himself reliable, well, I could use a partner in this operation more than an employee. I have been thinking about expanding, running more cattle, but I cannot do it alone. Hope bloomed in Naomi's chest, fragile and terrifying. I need to talk to Marcus. Of course. Think it over, both of you. But the offer stands. Marcus was furious when she first told him, pacing their tiny room like a caged animal while Naomi sat on the edge of the narrow bed and watched him wear a path in the floorboards. Work for another man, live on his charity. Marcus shook his head sharply. Naomi, I swore I would take care of you. Accepting this feels like admitting I cannot. It is not charity, it is employment, she said firmly. Marcus, we cannot keep living like this. I am so tired. And this way we would both have honest work and a chance to save money. He even said if you prove yourself, he might take you on as a partner. Partner in what? Ranching. Marcus laughed bitterly. I do not know the first thing about cattle or horses. Then you will learn. Marcus, please. She reached for his hand, pulling him to sit beside her. I love you. I chose you over everything I had ever known. But we need help, and this man is offering it with no strings attached. Can we really afford to refuse out of pride? Marcus closed his eyes, his jaw tight with frustration and wounded male pride. But when he opened them again and looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the exhaustion and strain she tried so hard to hide, something in him softened. You really want this? He asked quietly. I want us to have a future, she said. I want to stop feeling like we are drowning. Yes, I want this. He kissed her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. Then we will try it. But Naomi, if this O'Sullivan fellow shows you anything but respect, if he makes you uncomfortable in any way, we leave immediately. Understood? Understood. They moved to the ranch 3 days later with everything they owned fitting into 2 carpet bags and a small trunk Marcus had bought secondhand. Kieran showed them to their separate quarters without comment or judgment, Naomi to a small but clean room off the kitchen, Marcus to the bunkhouse that had space for 4, though currently only housed 1 other ranch hand, an older man named Pete who said little but worked hard. The first weeks were difficult in ways Naomi had not anticipated. Her mother had taught her the basics of cooking and housekeeping, but running a working ranch was entirely different from maintaining a tidy home in town. She learned to cook for hungry men who needed substantial meals to fuel long days of physical labor. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental kitchen stove, to preserve vegetables, to churn butter and render lard and do 100 other tasks that had always been mysterious necessities performed by invisible hands. Marcus struggled too. He was not accustomed to the brutal physical demands of ranch work, the endless round of feeding animals and mending fences and moving cattle and mucking stables. He came in each night bone-weary and quiet, his hands developing blisters and then calluses, his body aching in muscles he had not known he possessed. But Kieran was patient with both of them, teaching without condescension, praising small improvements, and never making either of them feel lesser for their ignorance. He worked alongside them in the fields and the barn, never asking anything of his employees that he would not do himself. And slowly, grudgingly, Marcus began to respect him. Naomi found herself watching Kieran when she thought no one was looking, noticing things she had not seen in that first meeting. The way he was unfailingly gentle with the animals, speaking to them in low, soothing tones that reminded her of her own instinctive words to the injured mare. The way he left wildflowers in a jar on the kitchen table each Monday, picked from the meadow on his morning rounds. The way he sometimes stood on the porch at sunset, hat in hand, staring out at his land with an expression of such contentment that it made her heart ache with something she could not name. She loved Marcus. She did. But Marcus was restless energy and grand dreams and passionate declarations. Kieran was steady as stone, quiet kindness, and the slow satisfaction of work well done. They were as different as fire and earth, and Naomi found herself drawn to both in ways that confused and frightened her. Summer deepened into the golden abundance of July. The garden flourished under Naomi's care, providing fresh vegetables for their meals and surplus to preserve for winter. Marcus grew stronger and more confident in his work, his initial resentment fading as he discovered he actually enjoyed the physical challenge of ranch labor. And Kieran treated them both with unfailing courtesy, giving them space to navigate their complicated situation while offering steady friendship. It was Marcus who first started spending his evenings in town again, just a few hours after dinner, claiming he needed to see if any letters had come for him at the post office. Naomi knew better. She could smell the whiskey on him when he returned, see the flush of excitement that meant he had been playing cards again. She said nothing at first, hoping it was just restlessness, just the need to feel like himself again after days of hard labor. But the few hours stretched longer. The smell of whiskey grew stronger, and one night in early August, Marcus came back with a split lip and a guilty expression that told her everything she needed to know even before he confessed. "I lost $20, he said, unable to meet her eyes. "Naomi, I am sorry. I thought I had a sure hand, but the man was cheating and I called him on it and things got ugly." She felt something break inside her, small and painful. $20, that is a month of your wages. I know. God, I know, but I can win it back. "I just need to stop gambling," she interrupted, her voice shaking. "Marcus, you promised. You said you wanted to build something real." "I do want that." He grabbed her hands, his grip almost painful in its intensity. "Naomi, I swear this was just one mistake. It will not happen again." But it did happen again. And again. Each time Marcus swore it was the last. Each time he promised to change, and each time Naomi felt the future she had sacrificed everything for slipping further out of reach. Kieran said nothing, but she knew he noticed. How could he not? When Marcus started showing up late for morning chores, when money went missing from his wages before it could be saved, when the restless unhappiness returned to his eyes, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. The confrontation came on a sweltering afternoon in late August when Naomi went to town for supplies and saw Marcus through the saloon window, cards in hand, a whiskey glass at his elbow, his face alight with the fevered excitement of the gamble. She stood on the dusty street and felt the last of her illusions crumble to ash. That evening, she told Marcus it was over. They stood behind the barn where no one could overhear, and she spoke the words she had been avoiding for weeks. "I cannot do this anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Marcus. I will always love the man I thought you were, the man you wanted to be. But you will never be that man. You are a gambler to your bones, and no amount of wishing will change it. Naomi, please." He was crying too, his face twisted with anguish. "I can change. I swear I can. Just give me one more chance." "I've given you a dozen chances," she said gently, "and you have failed everyone. I am not angry, Marcus. I am just tired, so very tired." "What will you do?" he asked hoarsely. "Stay here if Kieran will let me. Build the life I should have chosen from the start." She touched his face one last time, memorizing the features she had once loved beyond reason. "Goodbye, Marcus. I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for." He left before dawn the next morning, taking his few possessions and the horse he had bought with his wages. Naomi watched from the kitchen window as he rode away, feeling nothing but numb relief that the struggle was finally over. Kieran found her there an hour later, staring at nothing, her coffee gone cold in her hands. "How are you?" he asked quietly. "I do not know," she admitted, empty, sad, relieved, all of those things at once. She looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. "Do you want me to leave too?" "I know you hired me because of Marcus." "I hired you because you are a good worker and a kind person," Kieran corrected. "Marcus had nothing to do with it. You have a place here as long as you want it, Naomi. I mean that." Something tight in her chest loosened. "Thank you." The summer faded into autumn, and Naomi found herself healing in ways she had not expected. The work was hard but satisfying, each day bringing tangible proof of her efforts: meals cooked, clothes mended, a garden harvested and put by for winter. She learned to ride the gentle mare Kieran assigned to her, venturing out to help move cattle or check fences, feeling competent and capable in ways she had never imagined. And she learned Kieran. Learned his quiet humor that emerged in unexpected moments, his patient way of explaining things, his deep connection to the land he worked. He treated her with respect and friendship, never pushing for more, but she felt something shifting between them, something tentative and careful and achingly sweet. It was Kieran who finally addressed the elephant between them on a crisp October evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sun paint the hills in shades of amber and rose. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice careful. "And I need you to know there is no pressure, no expectation. Your job here is not dependent on your answer, and our friendship will not change regardless. Can you promise to remember that?" Naomi's heart began to beat faster. "I promise." "I have feelings for you," Kieran said simply. "I've tried not to, tried to respect what you had with Marcus, tried to be just a friend and employer. But Naomi, I cannot hide it anymore. I care about you. I admire you. And if you ever thought you might care for me too, I would like the chance to court you properly." She had known this was coming, had felt it building between them for weeks, but hearing the words still made her breath catch. "Kieran, I just ended things with Marcus 2 months ago. People will talk. They will say terrible things about me, about us." "Let them talk," he said fiercely. "I do not care what the gossips of Murphy's think. I care about you, about your happiness, but I understand if you need time." Naomi thought about Marcus, about the passionate, desperate love that had cost her everything and given her nothing but heartbreak. She thought about her parents, about the price of choosing wrong, and she thought about Kieran, about his steady kindness, his quiet strength, the way he made her feel safe and valued and seen. "I do not need time," she said softly. "I have been falling in love with you for months, Kieran. I was just too scared to admit it, even to myself. Yes, I want you to court me. Yes, I would like to see where this leads." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant and full of joy. He reached for her hand, tentative, and she let him take it, feeling the calluses on his palm that matched the ones on hers, earned through the same hard work and shared purpose. "Then be part of my family instead," he said. "You lost yours for love, Naomi. Let me give you a new one." The courtship was slow and sweet, propriety observed despite the hunger growing between them. Kieran brought her flowers and small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he had ordered from San Francisco, a carved wooden box for her letters. They took long rides through the hills, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams and fears. He kissed her for the first time on a November afternoon beneath an oak tree, gentle and reverent, his hands framing her face like she was something precious beyond measure. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Marry me, Naomi. Be my wife, my partner, my family. Help me build something that will last." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in December at the small church in Murphy's, with Pete standing as witness and the minister's wife playing the organ. Naomi wore a simple dress of cream wool that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Kieran wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving her face as they exchanged vows that bound them together before God and law. Her parents did not attend. Naomi had sent them an invitation, hope and heartbreak warring in her chest, but received no reply. As she stood at the altar and promised to love and honor Kieran O'Sullivan for all her days, she felt the ghost of her father's rejection like a scar on her heart. But Kieran's hand was warm in hers, his voice steady as he vowed to cherish her, and she chose to look forward rather than back. The wedding night was gentle and careful, Kieran taking his time to learn her body, to ease her nervousness, to show her that physical love could be tender as well as passionate. Afterwards, wrapped in his arms in the bed that was now theirs, Naomi felt a peace she had never known with Marcus. This was what she had been searching for all along, not grand gestures and dramatic declarations, but quiet devotion and steady partnership and love that would weather any storm. The winter was mild that year, and they spent the quiet months planning for spring. Kieran taught Naomi the business side of ranching, how to track expenses and income, negotiate prices, plan for breeding and sales. She discovered she had a head for figures and organization that complemented his practical knowledge of land and animals. They made a good team, finishing each other's thoughts, working in comfortable silence or easy conversation as the mood struck them. In February, Naomi realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She told Kieran one morning over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "I am going to have a baby," she said quietly. "In September, I think." He went completely still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down with shaking hands and crossed to her, pulling her up into an embrace so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Naomi, are you happy about this? Are you all right?" "I am terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I am happy. Are you?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat belly. "Hello in there," he whispered. "I am your father, and I already love you more than I knew was possible." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Naomi continued working as long as she could, only reluctantly agreeing to lighter duties as her belly swelled. Kieran was absurdly protective, worried about her lifting anything heavier than a basket, but his concern came from love, and she could not fault him for it. In late August, as her time drew near, a letter arrived addressed to Mrs. Naomi O'Sullivan. Naomi stared at her mother's handwriting on the envelope for a full minute before opening it with shaking hands. The letter was brief and carefully worded, but between the formal sentences, Naomi could read volumes of regret and longing. Her mother wrote that she had heard about the wedding, about the baby coming, about the ranch that was thriving under the O'Sullivan name. She wrote that Samuel Parker was unchanged, still rigid in his pride and certainty, but that Constance herself had been praying for guidance and could no longer bear the silence between them. "I do not ask for forgiveness," her mother wrote. "I know I failed you when you needed me most. But I hope that one day you might allow me to meet my grandchild. I hope that one day we might find a way back to each other, if not as we were, then as we might yet become." Naomi cried over that letter, great heaving sobs that brought Kieran running from the barn in panic. She showed him the words through her tears, and he held her while she wept for all that had been lost and all that might still be saved. "What do you want to do?" he asked when she had calmed enough to speak. "I want to forgive her," Naomi said. "I want our child to know its grandmother." "But Kieran, I cannot have my father's judgment and rejection poisoning our family. I will not expose our baby to that kind of conditional love." "Then we set boundaries," Kieran said firmly. "Your mother is welcome here if she comes in peace and kindness. But your father is not welcome unless he can treat you with the respect you deserve. This is our home, Naomi. We decide who enters it." She wrote back that same evening, her words careful but warm, extending an invitation for her mother to visit after the baby was born. She made no mention of her father, except to say that she would not tolerate criticism of her choices or her husband in her own home. The letter was both olive branch and boundary, and sending it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had thought lost forever. Their son was born on a golden September morning, arriving with the efficiency and determination that would characterize his entire personality. The midwife, Mrs. Chen from the hotel, who had softened considerably toward Naomi over the past year, declared him perfect healthy lungs, strong limbs, and a head full of dark hair that might have come from either parent. "What will you name him, Mrs. Chen asked as she cleaned the baby and wrapped him in soft blankets. Kieran looked at Naomi, his eyes asking permission. They had discussed names endlessly over the summer, unable to agree until Kieran had suggested one that made Naomi's breath catch. "Samuel," she said softly. "His name is Samuel Kieran O'Sullivan, for both his grandfathers, whether they deserve the honor or not." Kieran took his son with hands that trembled with awe and love. "Hello, Samuel," he whispered. "Welcome home." Constance Parker arrived 2 weeks later, traveling alone by stage from Murphy's. She stood at the ranch gate like a supplicant, her face lined with grief and hope, until Naomi walked out to meet her. They stood facing each other for a long moment, the weight of all that had passed between them hanging heavy in the air. Then Constance began to cry, and Naomi found herself crying too, and they fell into each other's arms with the desperate relief of prisoners finally freed. "I am so sorry," Constance sobbed. "My darling girl, I am so very sorry. I was a coward. I chose wrong, and I have regretted it every single day." "You are here now," Naomi said, pulling back to look at her mother's face. "That is what matters. Come inside and meet your grandson." Constance fell in love with baby Samuel instantly, her face transforming with wonder as she held him. She stayed for 3 days, sleeping in the guest room and helping with the endless tasks that came with a newborn. She and Kieran were polite but wary with each other at first. But by the 3rd day, he had relaxed enough to joke with her, and she had relaxed enough to thank him for making her daughter happy. On the morning she left, Constance took Naomi's hands in hers and spoke the truth they had both been avoiding. "Your father will not bend," she said quietly. "I have tried, Naomi. I have begged and pleaded and argued until we barely speak to each other anymore. But his pride is stronger than his love, and I cannot change that." "I know," Naomi said. "And Mama, I need you to know I do not expect you to choose between us. I do not want to cause more pain in your life." "You are not causing pain," Constance said fiercely. "Your father is causing pain with his stubbornness and pride. Naomi, I may not be able to leave him, but I can choose to have my daughter and grandson in my life. I will visit when I can. I will write letters. And perhaps one day he will realize what a fool he has been. But if he does not, you and I will still have each other. I promise you that." True to her word, Constance visited every few months, traveling alone and staying for a few days each time. She brought gifts for Samuel, helped with the household work, and slowly rebuilt the relationship with her daughter that Samuel Parker's pride had nearly destroyed. She never spoke ill of Naomi's father, but her silence on the subject was eloquent. The years flowed past like water over stone, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. The ranch prospered under Kieran and Naomi's joint management, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the county. They bought adjoining land, expanded their herd, hired additional help, and earned a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. Samuel grew into a sturdy, clever boy with his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, a daughter joined the family, Grace, named for the gift she was, with blonde hair like Kieran and eyes the color of storm clouds. 2 years later came another son, Thomas, loud and laughing from his first breath. Naomi sometimes thought about Marcus, wondered where he had gone and whether he had ever found what he was searching for. She bore him no ill will. He had been wrong for her, but that did not make him a bad man, just a restless one, unable to settle into the kind of life she needed. She hoped he was happy, wherever the cards and whiskey had taken him. Her father she thought about less often, the wound of his rejection scarring over into something she could live with if not forget. Constance brought news occasionally. Samuel Parker had suffered a small stroke, had retired from teaching, had grown more rigid and isolated with each passing year. Naomi felt pity for him, but nothing stronger. He had made his choice, and she had made hers, and the gulf between them was too wide to bridge without effort from both sides. On a brilliant May morning in 1881, 6 years after she had walked out of her father's house with nothing but a carpet bag and broken heart, Naomi stood on the porch of her ranch and watched her children play in the yard. Samuel was teaching Grace to rope a fence post, both of them laughing at her attempts. Baby Thomas sat in the dirt, examining a beetle with intense concentration. The house behind her was full of life and love and the accumulation of years well lived. The land stretched out in all directions, golden and green and theirs. Kieran came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," she said honestly. "How far we have come. How different my life is from what I imagined when I was a girl in town, reading poetry and dreaming small dreams. How grateful I am for all of it, even the hard parts." "No regrets?" he asked quietly. She turned in his arms to face him, this man who had given her everything when she had nothing, who had loved her with patience and constancy through all the storms of building a life together. "Not a single one," she said. "You gave me a family when mine turned away. You gave me a home when I was homeless. You gave me a future when I thought I had thrown mine away. How could I have regrets about any of that?" He kissed her in the morning sunlight, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together through determination and partnership, and love that deepened with every passing year. Their children played at their feet, the ranch spread out around them, and Naomi Parker O'Sullivan knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The story could have ended there, with that moment of perfect contentment. But life was not made of single moments, however beautiful, and the O'Sullivan family still had threads to weave before their tale was complete. In the autumn of that same year, a letter arrived that changed everything. It came addressed to Kieran, sent from a lawyer in Sacramento, and when he opened it at the dinner table, his face went pale and still. "What is it?" Naomi asked, alarm rising. "Kieran, what is wrong?" "It is about my uncle," he said slowly. "My father's brother, Edmund O'Sullivan." I did not know he even knew where I was. Naomi, he has died and he has left me land. A lot of land. Grazing rights in the high country, timber rights, water rights to a creek system that feeds half the ranches in this valley. This changes everything. Changes it how? She asked, setting down her fork. We could expand like we have always talked about. Run cattle in the high meadows during summer, bring them down for winter. Cut timber for sale. We would go from prosperous to wealthy, Naomi. We could build a bigger house, hire more help, send the children to the best schools. We could build something that would last for generations. Naomi looked at her husband's face, seeing the excitement there, the ambition that he so rarely showed. Kieran was content with enough, never pushed for more, but she could see this inheritance had awakened something in him, not greed, but the vision of what they could become. Then we will do it, she said simply. We will take this gift and build something magnificent. The expansion took 3 years of hard work. They hired a crew to build a new barn and bunkhouse to accommodate the additional ranch hands they needed. Kieran spent weeks at a time in the high country during summer, moving cattle to the mountain meadows and overseeing the careful logging operations that brought in substantial cash. Naomi managed the home ranch and the business side of things, her organizational skills proving invaluable as their operation grew more complex. It was during this time of growth and change that Samuel Parker finally broke his 6-year silence. The letter came in the spring of 1884, written in a hand that shook with age or emotion or both. It was addressed to Naomi, and the words were stiff and formal, but they were there finally after so much time. I have been informed that you have prospered, he wrote. That your husband is a man of substance and reputation. That my grandchildren are healthy and well cared for. Your mother has spoken of little else during her visits home, though I suspect she has censored much of what she tells me. I am writing to inform you that I have reconsidered my position regarding your marriage. If you and your family would care to visit, I would receive you. Naomi read the letter 3 times, feeling nothing at first, then everything at once. Anger that it had taken her father 6 years, and evidence of her financial success, to reconsider his rejection. Relief that the estrangement might finally end. Grief for all the years lost, for the grandfather Samuel and Grace and Thomas had never known, for the daughter her father had thrown away over pride. She showed the letter to Kieran that evening after the children were in bed. He read it in silence, his jaw tight. He does not apologize, Kieran said finally. He does not admit he was wrong, he just graciously informs you that you are now respectable enough to acknowledge. I know, Naomi said. Believe me, I know, but Kieran, he is my father. He is 70 years old and increasingly frail according to Mama. If I do not make peace with him now, I may never have another chance. And you want that. Peace with a man who disowned you for loving the wrong person, who made you choose between him and your own heart. No, Naomi admitted. I do not want it, but I need it. I need to be able to tell our children that I tried, that I was the bigger person, that I did not let pride poison another generation the way it poisoned mine. Does that make sense? Kieran pulled her into his arms, his embrace steady and strong. It makes sense. And if you want to visit him, we will go. But Naomi, promise me something. If he says one single word that disrespects you or our family, we leave immediately. You do not owe him forgiveness, and you certainly do not owe him the chance to hurt you again. I promise, she said. We leave at the first sign of judgment or criticism. But I have to try, Kieran. I have to know I did everything I could. They went to Murphy's on a Saturday in June, the whole family dressed in their best clothes. Samuel and Grace were excited about the adventure of visiting the town where their mother had grown up. Thomas, at 4, was just happy to be included. Naomi felt sick with nerves the entire ride, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that Kieran had to gently pry them apart. The Parker house looked smaller than Naomi remembered, the paint more faded, the garden less tended. Her mother answered the door, her face lighting up at the sight of them before clouding with worry. "He is in the parlor," Constance said quietly. "He has been agitated all morning." "Naomi, be patient with him. He is not well." Samuel Parker sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket despite the summer warmth. He had aged dramatically, his face sunken, his hands trembling with palsy, his eyes rheumy and dim. When Naomi entered with her family, he struggled to rise, his pride still strong even if his body was failing. "Stay seated, Papa," Naomi said, her voice catching. "Please do not get up." He sank back into the chair, his eyes moving over her face as if trying to reconcile this confident woman with the frightened girl who had left his house 9 years before. Then his gaze shifted to Kieran and the children, assessing and measuring. "So you are O'Sullivan," Samuel said, his voice weak but still carrying the imperious tone Naomi remembered. "I have heard you have done well for yourself." "I have worked hard," Kieran said evenly. "As has your daughter. We have built a good life together. And these are my grandchildren." Samuel's eyes lingered on the children, who stood close to their parents, unsure of this strange old man. "This is Samuel, named for both his grandfathers," Naomi said, bringing her oldest forward. "He is 8 years old and learning to manage cattle. This is Grace, who is 5 and can already outride most of our ranch hands. And this is Thomas, who is 4 and thinks he is much older." Samuel Parker's face worked with emotion as he looked at the boy who bore his name. "You named him after me," he said hoarsely. "Even after what I did, you named your son after me." "I named him after the father I remembered from childhood," Naomi said quietly. "The man who taught me to read, who told me stories, who said I could be anything I wanted to be." "I do not know where that man went, Papa, but I hoped he might still exist somewhere beneath the pride and stubbornness." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "I was a fool," he whispered. "God help me, Naomi, I was such a fool. I thought I was protecting you, saving you from a terrible mistake. And instead, I threw away my daughter and 9 years I can never get back. Can you ever forgive me?" The apology she had needed for so long finally came, and Naomi found that anger and resentment could not stand against it. She knelt beside her father's chair and took his trembling hands in hers. "Yes, Papa," she said through her tears. "I forgive you. I forgive you for all of it." Samuel Parker wept then, great gasping sobs that shook his frail frame. Constance cried quietly in the corner. The children watched with wide, uncertain eyes as their mother embraced their grandfather, healing a wound that had festered for nearly a decade. They spent the afternoon there, sharing a meal and telling stories. Samuel asked questions about the ranch, about the children's education, about their future plans. He listened to Kieran with respect, acknowledged his own errors in judgment, and thanked him for giving Naomi the life she deserved. It was not perfect, there was too much history, too much pain for perfect, but it was a beginning, a tentative rebuilding of bridges burned long ago. As they prepared to leave, Samuel called Naomi to his side one last time. "I may not have much time left," he said quietly. "The doctors have been clear about that. But I will go to my grave grateful that you gave me this chance, that you let me know my grandchildren, that you were big enough to forgive when I did not deserve it. You are a better person than I ever was, Naomi. I am proud to call you my daughter." "I love you, Papa," she said, kissing his weathered cheek. "I always did, even when I was angry, I never stopped." "I know," he said. "That is what made my pride so unforgivable, but you are here now and that is what matters." Go home to your beautiful ranch and your good husband and your fine children. Live well, Naomi. Be happy. That is all I want for you now." Samuel Parker died peacefully in his sleep 3 months later. The whole town turned out for his funeral, and Naomi stood beside his grave with her mother on one side and Kieran on the other, flanked by their children, and felt the complicated grief of loving someone who had hurt her deeply but whom she had forgiven in time. Her father had not been a bad man, just a flawed one, and she was grateful they had found peace before the end. Constance came to live at the ranch after that, moving into the guest room that became permanently hers. She was a wonderful grandmother, patient and loving, and she filled her days helping with the children and the house and the 1,000 tasks that made up ranch life. She and Naomi grew close in ways they had never been when Naomi was young, two women who had both loved and lost and learned and grown. The years continued their steady march. The children grew and thrived. Samuel Jr. showed a gift for animal husbandry and took over more and more of the breeding program as he entered his teens. Grace, contrary to everything expected of a girl in 1890, declared her intention to study veterinary medicine, and proved so determined that Kieran and Naomi supported her dream, despite the scandal it caused. Thomas showed less interest in ranching than his siblings, but had a head for figures that made him invaluable in managing the business side of the operation. In 1895, on their 20th wedding anniversary, Kieran took Naomi on a trip to San Francisco, leaving the ranch in the capable hands of their children and employees. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at elegant restaurants, and walked along the waterfront watching ships come and go from around the world. On their last evening, standing on a pier with the fog rolling in and the lights of the city glowing behind them, Kieran pulled Naomi close and spoke words that summed up everything they had built together. "You remember what I said to you that first day when I offered you work?" he asked. "You said a lot of things that day," Naomi replied, smiling up at him. "I told you that if you had lost your family for love, I would give you a new one, that you could be part of my family instead." Kieran tucked a strand of gray threaded hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "Naomi O'Sullivan, you have given me so much more than I ever gave you. You have given me 3 extraordinary children, a partnership that has built something lasting and meaningful, and 20 years of love that has sustained me through every challenge. You took my family and made it ours, and then made it into something greater than I could have ever imagined alone. I am the luckiest man alive." "We built it together," Naomi said, her eyes bright with emotion. "Everything we have, everything we are, we built it together, side by side. You gave me a home when I was homeless, Kieran. You gave me love when I was lost. You gave me a future when I thought mine was over. And you have spent every day of 20 years proving that choosing you was the best decision I ever made." He kissed her there on the pier, surrounded by strangers and seagulls and the smell of salt air, and Naomi felt the same flutter of joy she had felt at 19, at 25, at 35. Love, she had learned, was not the wild, desperate passion she had felt for Marcus Hendricks, that burned hot and bright and consumed itself in its own fire. Real love was this steady and constant, deepening with every shared challenge and triumph, growing richer with time like good wine aging in oak barrels. They returned home to find the ranch running smoothly, their children proud of their success in managing things independently, and Constance beaming with pride at how well her grandchildren had risen to the challenge. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythms: work and family, seasons passing, the eternal cycle of birth and growth and harvest. In 1898, Grace left for veterinary college in the East, one of only a handful of women in the program. She wrote home every week, her letters full of excitement and frustration and determination. Samuel Jr. married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a sensible woman named Mary who loved the land as much as he did. They built a house on the eastern section of the O'Sullivan property and started their own family, giving Naomi and Kieran their first grandchild in 1899, a girl they named Constance, after her great-grandmother, who cried with joy at the honor. Thomas went to study business in San Francisco, showing no inclination to return to ranching but managing the family's investments and business interests with skill that ensured the O'Sullivan fortune continued to grow. He was happy in the city, and Naomi and Kieran were happy that he had found his place even if it was far from theirs. Constance Parker passed peacefully in her sleep in 1901, surrounded by her family in the home she had come to love. She was 72 years old and had spent the last 17 years rebuilding the relationship with her daughter that Samuel Parker's pride had nearly destroyed. At her funeral, Naomi spoke of forgiveness, of second chances, of love that persevered through mistakes and pain. She buried her mother in the O'Sullivan family plot on the ranch, next to the space reserved for Naomi herself when her time came, ensuring they would never be separated again. The new century brought changes to the West. The wild frontier of Naomi's youth was becoming civilized, settled, tamed. Automobiles appeared on the roads alongside horses. Telephones connected ranch to town. The railroad brought goods and people from back east with unprecedented speed. The O'Sullivan Ranch adapted and prospered, using new technologies while maintaining the core values that had built it: hard work, fair dealing, and family. In 1910, Kieran and Naomi celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary surrounded by their extended family. Samuel Jr. and Mary had 3 children now. Grace had returned from veterinary college with a degree and a husband, a fellow veterinarian she had met in school, and was setting up a practice in Sacramento while raising twin boys. Thomas had married a society woman from San Francisco and had 2 daughters. The ranch house, expanded twice over the years, rang with the laughter of grandchildren and the conversation of adults who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. That evening, after the guests had departed, and the grandchildren were bedded down in various rooms throughout the house, Kieran and Naomi sat on their porch as they had done countless evenings over the past 35 years. He was 60 years old now, his hair entirely gray, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. She was 57, her beauty matured into something deeper and more lasting than the prettiness of youth. They held hands in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever think about how different your life would have been if you had never left your father's house?" Kieran asked. "If you had chosen duty over love?" "Sometimes," Naomi admitted. "I would have been respectable and miserable, I suppose. Married to some merchant or banker my father approved of, living a small, constrained life, and never knowing what I was capable of achieving. I would never have known real love, real partnership, real purpose." "And Marcus?" Kieran asked. It was the first time he had spoken that name in years. "Do you ever wonder what happened to him?" "I heard he died in a gambling dispute in Nevada in 1888, Naomi said quietly. "He was shot over a dispute about marked cards. I was sad when I learned about it, but not surprised. Marcus was always going to end badly. He could not help himself. I am grateful he came into my life because he gave me the courage to leave my father's house, but I am more grateful that I was smart enough to let him go before he dragged me down with him." "It took real strength to walk away from him," Kieran said. "I remember thinking at the time that you were the bravest person I had ever met. You proved it again and again over the years." "We have been brave together," Naomi corrected. "You took a chance on a disgraced woman with nothing to her name but a carpetbag and broken dreams. You offered me work and friendship and eventually love, never asking for anything I was not ready to give. You built me up when I was broken, Kieran. I will never stop being grateful for that." "You built me up too," he said. "Before you came, this ranch was just a place I worked. You made it a home. You made it family. Everything good in my life came from the day you walked into my barn with blood on your apron and kindness in your eyes, helping a horse you did not even know." They sat in peaceful silence as the night deepened around them, two people who had weathered storms together and come out stronger for it. The ranch spread out in all directions, a testament to their partnership, their determination, their love. Their children and grandchildren slept under their roof, carrying on the O'Sullivan name and values into a new generation. And Naomi Parker O'Sullivan, who had once lost everything for love, knew that she had gained so much more than she had sacrificed. Kieran O'Sullivan lived to see his 70th birthday, dying peacefully in 1920 with Naomi holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed. His last words were "Thank you for saying yes," and Naomi held those words in her heart like treasures through the lonely years that followed. She lived another 12 years without him, staying active in the ranch management well into her 70s, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren arrive, the matriarch of a family that spanned 4 generations and would continue long after she was gone. When Naomi Parker O'Sullivan died in 1932 at the age of 79, she was laid to rest beside Kieran in the family plot on the ranch they had built together. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people, family, friends, employees past and present, business associates, and townspeople who remembered her story. The minister spoke of courage and forgiveness, of choosing love over fear, of building something lasting from the ruins of rejection. But the real eulogy was the ranch itself, still thriving under the management of Samuel Jr.'s children. It was the family that gathered to mourn her passing dozens of descendants who existed because a young woman had chosen love over obedience, because a kind man had offered family to someone who had lost hers, because 2 people had built a life together based on respect and partnership and devotion that deepened with every passing year. Naomi's story became legend in Murphy's, told and retold as the years passed. The girl who had been disowned for loving the wrong man and found her true family with a cowboy who said, "Then be part of my family instead." It was a story about second chances, about the difference between passionate infatuation and lasting love, about the courage it takes to walk away from what is safe in search of what is right. But more than that, it was a story about coming home not to a place, though the ranch was certainly that, but to a person. Kieran had been Naomi's home from the moment he offered her work and dignity when she had neither. She had been his home from the moment she smiled at him over a wounded horse and showed him that kindness still existed in the rough world of the West. Together, they had built a home that lasted for generations, a love that weathered every storm, and a family that honored their memory by living the values they had exemplified: courage, forgiveness, hard work, and love that chose commitment over passion, partnership over possession, and steady devotion over dramatic gestures. In the end, Naomi had not just found a new family when her own disowned her. She had built one, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice, until it became something greater and more enduring than anything she had lost. And that, perhaps, was the real miracle of her story: not that she had survived rejection and heartbreak, but that she had transformed them into something beautiful, lasting, and full of love.